Good morning to all of you. Once again, welcome back to all my dear students. So this is the series number 2, and which we have already covered the lecture number 1. In the previous lecture, we have discussed very important points. So what is the prose, meaning of prose, prose analysis, what are the types of prose. Okay, so we will cover all these things. So in this video, we are going to discuss about very important points. Okay, so before start the video, now I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Professor Deepak Kokani. I'm a Department of English, Pratap College, Amalir, where I work as an assistant professor. I teach to UG and PG level students. Okay, so without waste our times, we are going to move ahead. Okay, dear students, here today's topic, which is very important topic. The topic is scope of practical criticism in prose. So, what is the scope of practical criticism in prose? Fiction, in scope fiction, non-fiction. Okay, and in the fiction there is a short stories, novels also come. Non-fiction there is a essays and speeches also come. So before the start the video, before the start the points we are just discuss about. So what is the introduction? What is the introduction of the practical criticism and prose? So introduction, practical criticism and prose. Okay, practical criticism is a method of literary analysis. So this is the method of literary analysis that emphasizes a close reading of the text itself. Okay, the practical criticism also the focuses on the close reading. So how one should closely read the particular text, okay, itself. So this is the focus. Okay, then focusing on the language. So very important thing is here. Practical criticism, so always focusing on language, focusing on structure, focusing on meaning and technique. So these are components where the practical criticism always focus on that. So this is called practical rather than external context, okay, such as author biography or historical background. Okay, practical criticism, it is not to focus on the external background of the author. So what is the background of the author? So what is the story? What is he, when where he is born? So this is not very much important in the practical criticism, but practical criticism which is focus on the text, which is language, meaning, structure. Okay, so this is how the practical criticism always focus on that. Okay, then background, the approach gained prominence, okay, through critics like I.A. Richards and later influenced new criticism. So I.A. Richards, who is a father of practical criticism, the first time when he wrote so much works in his work, there is his famous work in his famous works, Practical Criticism, where he stated that where he did a particular experiment on the undergraduate students. He stated that undergraduate students, so students, you have to do one thing. You can go at your home and where you read a particular poem. So but poem, you don't know what is the background of poem, you don't know who is the poet, the particular poem. So you just read and you just understand. So what is the language, what is the structure, what is the meaning in the context. So after that, what happened, the students answer were very different kind of answers. Also, this is called practical criticism, always focus on that. So this is how the I.A. Richards, who made an experiment on the undergraduate students also. So this is how, this is the practical criticism. Okay, in prose studies, practical criticism becomes particularly significant because, okay, prose includes diverse form from the imaginative narratives and factual and argumentative writing. As a result, the scope of practical criticism varies according to genre, especially between the fictional prose and non-fictional prose. So this is how the practical criticism scope on, that is a fictional prose and non-fictional prose. Okay, Dear students, here is one chart and go through, we just understand. So what is the nature of prose and its impact on critical scope? Okay, so here is the type of prose. So there is a two types of prose which we have already covered. The first type of prose, fiction. The second type of prose, non-fiction. Okay, so what is the fiction nature and primary function? The fiction nature, it's a imaginative narrative. In the fiction, always imaginary. In the, as I taught you in the previous lecture, as I told you in the previous lecture, okay, the fiction always focus on the imaginative narrative, okay. And then primary function, what is the primary function of fiction? The primary function is the artistic, emotional and experimental, okay. So artistic, emotional and experimental, this is the primary function of the fiction, okay, dear students. So then type of prose, non-fiction. So what is the nature of non-fiction? Here is the nature, factual, okay. The nature of non-fiction always factual, which is called based on the real fact, real evidence, which is the we can say that a real incident experiences, a man who a writer who really experienced something, okay. This is called non-fiction, factual and discursive, okay. So what is the primary function of non-fiction? The primary function of non-fiction is informative, okay, persuasive and reflective. So why we call reflective? Because a writer, a reader who always reflect those things which he read particularly and which he also assimilate itself. So this is how role of the non-fictions in the prose writing, prose literature. Okay, because fictions aims to create an imagine world, criticism focuses on how the meaning is shaped through narrative art. Okay, non-fiction, however, aim to communicate ideas or argument. So criticism focuses on clarity, logic, and rhetorical effectiveness. So this is how the practical criticism always focuses on clarity, logic. There is also logic and rhetoric effectiveness. So this is the how we understand, we understood, this is understood by this chart, nature of prose and its impact on practical critical scope. Okay, so next, so in this slide we are going to cover scope of practical criticism in fiction. So what is the scope of practical criticism in fiction? So dear student, here you understand the fiction. If we talk about fiction, the fiction is a imaginative work. So someone, a writer who making imagination work, okay. And when he write a story, short story, novel, novella, so this is how. And but what is the scope of practical criticism in fiction? So we are going to just understand that things. So story and novels. So here is fictional prose allows a wider and more layered scope of practical criticism because it's combined narrative, psychological, linguistic and symbolic dimension also. So this is how symbolic dimension and narrative, psychological, linguistic also there. Okay, so what is the theme and vision of life in the short stories and novels? Okay, the theme and vision of life, identification of the central theme such as example annihilations, love, class conflict, okay, and identity. So these are themes also we are find in the short story and as well as in the novels also. So then exploration of sub themes and their interconnection to also each other, examination of the writer's vision of life, values and moral concerns. Okay, analysis of how themes emerge implicitly through the actions and imaginary rather than direct statement. Okay, rather than sometimes direct statement also there. Okay, in fictions, theme is really declared. Theme is really declared. It is a revealed through narrative moment. So dear students, here is also you understand theme is also revealed through the narrative moment. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, so what is the plot structure and narrative design in the short story and novels? So plot structure and narrative design in short story, unity of action, okay, economy of plot, sudden revelations of twist, moment of epiphany, okay, and what is the plot structure and narrative design in novels? So there is a complex multiple layer plot in the novel and short story. There is a different things, but in the novel also complex multiple layer plot, subplot also there, and parallel narratives, structural patterns such as linear, circular, and fragmented. So this is how the plot structure and narrative design in the short story and novels also. Okay. Critical focus. So what is the critical focus? Exposition, conflict, okay, conflict, climax and resolution. So this is how the critical focus on that. Use of flashback, foreshadowing, suspense also. So what is the flashback? What is the foreshadowing, suspense also use? Suspense means what will happen in the that particulars, which is called doubtfully. Narrative facing and its emotional impact. So these are points which is very important in the critical focus that. Okay, characterization and psychological depth. So what is the characterization and psychological depth? So here is analysis of major and minor characters. So there is also character in the story and novels also. Types of characters: round versus flat characters, static versus dynamic character. Okay, psychological realism and inner conflict. Okay, character development as a vehicle of theme. So here is very important point is character development also vehicle of the themes. So without characters, novels and show story nothing. Okay, so that's why character are very prominent, important in the short story also and novels also. Okay, dear students. In novels, characters often embody social, moral, or philosophical ideas. So, character also embodies the social and moral, philosophical ideas in the we can say that novels. Okay, so setting and social context, text internal. So, what is the setting and social context? Okay, text internal. Physical setting, time and place also mentioned in the story and novels. Okay, social cultural and economic background within the text. Okay, so what is the social cultural background within the text? Okay, setting as, if we talk about setting as symbolic. Okay, where is the setting also use the symbolic, where is use the symbols. Okay, deterministic. Okay, mood creating also setting. Why they creating the mood? Because reader who want to while the reading a novel particular story, it's become very interesting. So that's why this is the mood creating. Okay, practical criticism avoids historical research but examines how the setting functions inside the narrative. So this is how characterizations and psychological depth, setting and social context which we have covered. Okay. So in the next slide, point of view and narrative voice. In this slide, point of view. So what is the point of view? What is the narrative voice in the novel and story? The first person also there in the novel, in the short story. First person narration, third person limited person, okay, or omniscient also. So what is the third person limited and what is the omniscient? We will discuss in detail in the next lecture. Okay, in the third series. Okay, but we are here is only overlook. So what is exactly point of view and narrative voice? Okay, reliability of unreliability of narrative. So what is the reliability? Okay, trustiness. What is the reliability and unreliability of narrators? Distance between the narrator and author. So what is the distance between the narrator and authors also there point of in the point of view. Critical importance. So what is the critical importance? Shape shapes readers perceptions. So readers perception also shape where, okay, controls emotionals and moral alignments. So where is also control the emotionals and moral alignment. So which type of language and style in fiction to used. So language is descriptive richness. So in the fictions where is also use the language descriptive level, where the writer or novelist who is described to something, and as it is according his visionary mind, he making a word which is called imaginative word. So this is how descriptive richness, symbolic and metaphoric language, where is also use the symbolic and metaphoric language also use. Why they use the symbolic? Because symbolic, which is the highlight the symbolism, and symbolic use the such as the pigeon the symbol of peace, snake the symbol of demon. So these are symbols also used, so sometimes in the novels and short story also. Okay, symbolic and metaphoric language. Metaphoric, as it is, we can say that very different kind of language. So dialogue as a tool for character resolutions. Okay, plot advancement. Okay, sentence rhythm and narrative tones. Style in fiction is judged by suggestiveness, subtlety, and the aesthetic effect. So where is also important thing is also use the aesthetic effect also there, because aesthetic is without aesthetic effect, novel and short story will not complete it. Okay, so this is how today we just cover point of view and narrative voice. So which type of language and style in fictions, dialogue as a tool for. Okay, in the in this also some prominent figure of speech also used, such as the imagery. Okay, imagery and symbolism also there. So recurrent images and modify symbols functioning at the multiple levels, where is also use the multiple level symbols. Relationship between the image and things. So what is the relation between the image and things also? Okay, fictions involves interpretations rather than explanation. Okay, so fictions invites interpretation rather than explanation. So this is very important also, dear students. Okay, so scope summary. Fiction, practical criticism in the fictions is the aesthetic psychological. So the term is aesthetic, that is very important. Psychological and interpretative, focusing on how the narrative or transform experience into meaning. So this is very important, dear students. Okay, I hope you are all getting my point. Okay, here, as I told you, as we cover scope of practical criticism in non-fiction, but here is a the point is here, as we cover scope of practical criticism in fiction, but now we are going to cover scope of practical criticism in non-fiction. Okay, in the non-fiction, essays and speeches also there, articles also there. Okay, this is non-fiction prose demands a more intellectual and rhetoric approach to practical criticism. So this is very important, dear students. Central idea and thesis. So what is the central idea and thesis in the non-fiction? Identification of the main argument, clarity and focus on thought, relevance and significance of the topic. So topic is relevance and significance. In fictions, in non-fictions, ideas are foregrounded, not hidden. So idea is always in the non-fiction. Always the idea is always foregrounded. Okay, not hidden. Structure and logical organization. So what is the structure and logical organization? The structure is always non-fiction. Introduction, development, and conclusion. There is coherence and progressive of ideas, paragraph unity and transition. Critical focus, logical flaw. There is also logical flaw, balance between the explanation and illustration. So there is also balance between the explanation and resolution also. Okay, in the next slide. Okay, there is a argumentation and reasoning also in the scope in the non-fiction. Use of fact. There is also use of fact in the non-fiction, because non-fiction also based on the fact. Use of fact. Example, analogies. There is also use the analogies. Logical consistency. Dear student, here is in the non-fiction prose logical consistency, that is very important also. Handling of counter arguments, practical criticism evaluates intellectual integrity and persuasiveness. Okay, persuasiveness. So this is how argumentation and reasoning and the non-fiction prose. Okay, tone and authorial attitude. So what is the tone? What is the authorial attitude in the non-fiction prose? So tone and authorial attitude, reflective, persuasive, ironic, satirical, oratory. Okay, emotional appeal versus rational appeal. So where is also emotional. So but in this non-fiction prose, where is also rational thinking. A particular writer, reader, he also, when after that he also thinking rationally. Okay, thinking rationally, emotional appeals versus rational thinking, ethical stance of the writer. So ethical stance, that is very important. Tone reveals the relationship between the writer, subject and audience. So this is how tone reveals the relation between the writer, subject and audience, dear students. Okay, so language and rhetorical style. So which type of language and rhetorical styles were used? The languages, clarity, simplicity and precision. So this is the language is very clarity, clarify, which is very simple language, simplicity and precision. Use of rhetorical devices also. Where is also use some rhetorical devices. We can say that such as the figure of speech also use, such repetition figure of speech also use. Okay, so these are key points were used in that non-fiction prose. Okay, there is a parallelisms also there, antithesis, rhetorical questions also used in that non-fiction prose. In speeches, rhythm and sound become critical, but sometimes in speeches, rhythm and sound become very critical. Okay, audience awareness and persuasive strategy. Persuasive strategy. So what is the audience awareness and persuasive strategy? So there is a adaptation of language to audience. So language is always adapted to audience. Adaptation to audience. Use of emotional appeals, pathos. So sometimes we also use the emotional appeal known as the pathos. Also, then is the establishment of the credibility, ethos. Okay, and then is a logical reasoning, means logos. So these are some for the becoming the audience awareness and persuasive strategy. So these are adaptation of language to audience, use of emotional appeals, pathos, establishment of credibility, ethos, and logical reasoning, logos. So this is how these are prominent points to use in the non-fictional prose. Okay. Sometimes there is also use literary qualities in non-fiction. Although, dear student, here you understand, although factual non-fiction often employ, although actually there is no need in this non-fiction prose, but although the factual non-fiction often employs, such as metaphor also use sometimes. There is not 100% use, but sometimes they can use also metaphors, imagery, okay, allusions. Practical criticism evaluates how the literary elegance supports clarity. So this line, it is very important, dear students. So you have to note down this line. Okay, scope summary, non-fiction. Practical criticism in non-fiction is analytical, rhetorical and evaluative, focusing on effectiveness of communications rather than imaginative depth. So this is very scope summary of non-fiction. Okay, so move ahead. Dear students, here is very important chart for you, which I made for you only. Okay, fiction versus non-fiction, deep comparative analysis. Here I made some analysis. So I made some, what is the differences between the, what is the comparison between the fiction versus and non-fiction. Okay, so these are dimension. This is the fiction and this is the non-fiction. Okay. Here is the dimension also, the core focus. Okay, and here is the reader engagement. Here is the language, which language used in the fiction, which structure used in the fiction and non-fiction. Here is the interpretation. Okay, which interpretation, okay, in the fiction and non-fiction, and here is the critical approach also there. Okay, so one by one, the first dimension, core focus. The core focus on fiction. So what is the fiction core focus? The core focus only narrative meaning. So in this fiction, there is also focus on narrative meaning. Okay, narrative meaning. So narrative meaning, that is very important. Okay, in the non-fiction, core focus only argument and ideas. Where is the only very important thing is that, so non-fictions always core focus on arguments and ideas. Okay, so then next, reader engagement. So what is the reader engagement with the fiction and non-fiction, dear students? Here you understand. Okay, in the fiction, readers engagement, readers attachment, readers attraction. Okay, so how the fiction, readers engagement. In the fiction, reader can emotional and imaginative. Okay, he can make the emotional, he can make itself emotional and imaginative world in the fiction. Then non-fiction, intellectual and rational. Okay, in the non-fiction, readers engagement also intellectual and rational. Okay, so he can experience reality, fact. Okay, based on, so what is exactly happening in this essays, speeches. Okay, all these are in the articles also. So how the non-fictions readers engagement. So language. So which type of language in the fiction and non-fiction? Language in fiction, suggestive and symbolic. There is also a use of symbolism. There is also use of suggestive. Okay, and in the sorry, in the non-fiction, language is also clear, direct, and rhetorical. Okay, so this is called a language of the fiction and non-fiction. So what is the structure of fiction and non-fiction? The fiction of structure is artistic and flexible, whereas also structure is artistic and flexible. But in the non-fiction, the structure is logical and linear. Logical and linear, which means composition. Okay, extension, beginning, then rising, okay, rising action, then climax, and falling action. After that, resolution, which means ending, denouement. Okay, so this is the non-fiction also follow the pattern, real pattern of the structure, logical and linear. Okay, so what is the interpretation of the fiction? The interpretation of the fiction also open-ended. Okay, open for all, open-ended, and non-fiction interpretation is a purpose-driven. This is called purpose-driven. Okay, dear students. So then, what is the critical approach of the fiction? The critical approach of fiction is interpretative. That is a critical approach also interpretative. And what is the critical approach of the non-fiction? It is also evaluative. Okay, it is also evaluative. So this is how we cover. So comparative analysis, fiction versus non-fiction, deep comparative analysis. So I hope you are all understand. Okay, in the next slide, importance of practical criticism in prose. So what is the importance of practical criticism in prose? Because of that, train students in close reading. Students also very going to train when they go through the practical criticism. Okay, develop independent critical judgment. Students judgments also develop critical and independence. Sharpens linguistic sensibility. It's also boost and enhance, sharpens linguistic sensibility. Encourages comparative thinking also there. Comparative thinking also increase. Okay, bridge literature and community studies. So this is how the importance of practical criticism in prose. Okay. So dear students, today we have covered so what is the scope of practical criticism in prose, such as the fiction and non-fiction also, and we also covered so important points, okay, in the prose. Okay. So dear students, in the next series we will also see another prominent and important points regarding this topics also. So remaining topic we will discuss in the third series. Okay, but this series will be continue. Okay, you do not skip yourself. So you have to watch this video, and you have to share to millions and billions students, so they very need to understand the literature. Okay, so thank you so much to listening me patiently. I hope you are all understood today's very important video. So thank you once again.